Our first speaker this morning is Darren Bond. He'll be talking about reseeding and late decision making. Darren is a farm management specialist with Manitoba Agriculture, specializing in crop production risk, crop production costs, risk management, and farmland rental, while also being responsible for the annual guidelines for estimating field production costs. He believes every agronomic production decision made on the farm must also consider the economic costs and benefits in order to make the best decision possible. True to this, Darren and the farm management team has created many of the decision-making tools and resources found at Manitoba Agriculture.
Thanks, Anne. If everybody can hear me all right. First time at MAC, so thanks for having me. Dennis Lang, our esteemed provincial pulse specialist, called me up a little while ago, said, you know what, Darren, would you want to speak here? And I said, well, anything for you, Dennis. When he asked, you jump, right? And he was like, okay, that's good. We thought we'd mix it up a little bit, throw in some economics and some agronomy. He's like, yeah, no, good point. I can do that. And he's like, we'd like to have a little bit of a farm influence on this too. I farm in the Interlake area, which is about an hour's drive north of here. So, if you can bring in some aspects of your own farm, that'd be great. Yep, sure, I can do that. And he says, and we're thinking reseeding and late season decision making on the farm. I was like, what, just because I farm in the Interlake, you automatically assume that, I'm fighting mud, seeding late, and everything like that?
And what was that like this year?
Well, as everybody knows, I'm just teasing Dennis here. But yeah, there was some mud. It was a challenging year. Got stuck 3 times with the drill. It was a challenge, and you can probably tell from all those pictures we drive a 2-track, so wet corners are our nemesis. For those who don't know, 2-tracks will not turn when it's wet. You're on the ride and it'll decide where you're going. I almost seeded clear across number 7 highway once because we have a few fields right on the highway there, so that was interesting. But today I'm going to talk about a few things. I'm going to actually start off with our farm, kind of set the stage, pivot into some of the ag costs, the economic climate that we're in. It has changed. It has not changed for the better, unless you're a bankruptcy trustee, but it's gotten really tight out there. And then using those production costs in that current economic environment, boiling it back down to the reseeding and then late season decision making, and I'm going to bring back into our farm and kind of round out that discussion about some of the things that we've learned or relearned, and then some of the questions that we have, and a lot of farms in our area, even in the province, have as well. So a few picks on our farm. My son, who's actually in his last year of an ag degree here at the faculty, has been farming with me since, or I would say actively farming with me since 2021, and now he has seen everything. He has seen a drought, which, even in the 80s, drought hit us in our area, but, that 21 drought was pretty bad, coupled with the heat, to dirt devils, to flooding in 2022. We had a 7-inch rain that swamped a bunch of our fields, like 6 feet of water on these fields, to last year, which was very, very good in our area, to this year. And I would say this year was kind of the traditional interlake seeding year, where you seed for 1 day and you wait for 7 to 10 days. And then you go out, seed for 1 day and wait for 7 to 10 days with all the rain and everything like that. And when we say seed, we seed probably 22 hours at a 24-hour period, because rain's always in the forecast, or at least it was this spring. This picture here, we're seeding, you can't really see it that great. We pulled in when it was nighttime and we left when it was nighttime. But there's a lot of, you can kind of see some of the wheel depressions, and that was a real challenge. Really soft fields that normally aren't soft were soft, and you could tell everywhere where the drill drove. And it was pretty stressful, always worried about what the neighbors are going to think. They're going to laugh at you when they see a poor seeding job. And actually, surprisingly, this field turned out quite well. Give the drill a lot more credit than I think maybe what we give it. So this is our seeding drill. I'm kind of pretty firm on, I truly believe the success of a farm is how you seed and how you fertilize. Everything else flows out of that. So if you're working on with, say a sprayer and combine, not to say that those aren't important, but if you don't have the crop, you're not going to need to spray as much. So I really believe that this is important. We do one pass, and I'll show you a little bit more info on this, but it's a Deere 1895, which is a disc drill with mid-row-banders, or as John Deere like to say, separate fertilizer placement. And then we top up with anhydrous. I'll explain a little bit more about that. So our farm. So I'll actually talk about the video first, because all eyes go to the video first. So this is actually a disc drill, and it's just on a loop, so it should just keep on playing here. So this is a disc drill. So maybe I'll explain for maybe those who aren't as familiar. A lot of you will be very familiar with this. But essentially, disc drill is a single blade cutting a trench. You can kind of see in the video. There's a blade, that black wheel, that's the gauge wheel, provides the depth. And it runs at a 7-degree angle on these Deere drills, so it cuts a trench. So I know I get a lot of people saying, well, everything's round on a disc drill. Like, how can it be hard to pull when you're pulling it at that 7 degrees, and it's a hard pull. There's a little green wheel kind of in the middle of that opener there that you can see. That's a seed firming wheel, so the seed drops down through the seed boot, funnels into the bottom of the trench. The firming wheel runs in that trench, that's that green wheel, presses it, so we have good seed soil contact. And then the wheel right at the end, which looks like a spoked wheel, serrated wheel, that's a closing wheel. So we actually made 2 big upgrades, and this is important because this kind of plays into this whole discussion I'm having today. So the seed firming wheel, the green one up there, the Deere's factory is a metal wheel with a rubber cap, and it's a wide wheel. And what we found is that it would roll up with mud, it would pluck seeds out and leave them on the surface. That's bad. And we would have a hard time in mud. This new wheel, it's all poly, it's a lot slimmer, fits in there and it sheds mud. And it's surprising how well it sheds mud. And the last improvement was that wheel right at the back, the serrated closing wheel. Deere's factory option is a smooth metal wheel, and it runs right along the edge of the trench, and it's supposed to throw dirt in. But in wet conditions, the smooth wheels don't do such a good job. And in fact, when we seeded some wet ground, we could actually walk behind the drill, and every single trench was open, and we could see every single seed in there. And that was a big risk. Surprisingly, in those spots, the crop still yielded, but that scared us. So we upgraded to the spoke closing wheel. It's like a little rotary hoe, if you will, and it throws a little bit of loose dirt. And the idea is loose dirt goes in that trench and it pops up really quick. That's the idea. So with our farm, we're about a quarter in no-till, 3/4 in conventional till, reduced till. I don't know what your language is on that, but essentially we do a heavy harrow, a chisel plow pass with spikes, and then a heavy harrow. And the idea with that is a few things. Is that with the no-till, we actually had more no-till to start 24. I'll talk a little bit about that. We find that this is kind of works good. We're not doing too much tillage, but doing enough to get a little bit of black dirt just to dry it out. That helps. I think everybody would like to do direct seeding. It really lightens up the workload. But I'll show you some pictures of what some challenges are. We also believe in high management. So we soil test every field every year. I'm going to show you some fertilizer pricing charts, and I don't know why everybody doesn't do it, because it's compared to the price of a soil test, compared to fertilizer, it's just a no-brainer for me. We've moved to growth regulators and better quality fungicides on the cereals, and so we have high yield targets. High yield targets, as we all know, means high fertilizer requirements. And we're in a one-pass seeding fertilizing. I'll talk about that on this slide. I will say that I do get a bit of criticism when I talk about what's one pass, and a criticism I get is fertilizer supply, workloads, all those types of things. And I'm not saying that one pass is a paradise. There's definitely challenges with it, but it sure has worked on our farm. So it can be quite costly. Jump on the treadmill, run with me for the equipment pricing, because if we're going to do mid-row banders, we need dual chute. We need a bigger tank, unless you're wanting to stop to fill every 30 or 40 acres. Then you know what? Maybe you need bigger tubes and a second fan. Your tractor can't power all that hydraulics, so now you need another tractor. Just get on that treadmill and run and write a check, right? So what we looked at was something a little bit different. So thankfully our drill was spec'd out that we could actually do a dual delivery. Dual delivery in our case is a dry fertilizer and an anhydrous. So Deere suggested that we had to do a few modifications to the drill. So if we can see here, this is where that cursor is. That's the seed break or the air relief system. So the way this opener works is it runs at a little bit narrower trench, 5-degree trench. So the idea is a narrow trench, not as much chance for anhydrous to escape. Then we have the air relief system or the air brake. So that fertilizer is coming down, and for those who maybe aren't familiar with it, think of it as like the velocity of like a hairdryer, if you will, that's coming out. So now if you don't vent off that, the risk is you blow the gas out of the trench, right? So that we have these seed brakes set at maximum air relief. So the idea is that once it hits that stainless steel piece and it starts to whirl around, the air goes up through the top and just the fertilizer just falls by gravity into the bottom of the trench. And the other big thing was the serrated closing wheel, which is this wheel right here. The idea behind a serrated closing wheel, again, is more aggressive trench closure, so that trench is open-closed. And essentially, the idea is to reduce loss. There's a lot of different mid-row-bander configurations out there, from C-shanks, just a straight cultivator shank, to just a disc and a tube, and all sorts of just janky, in my opinion, row closure mechanisms. I think this one is probably one of the best in my experience. Now, unfortunately, when we upgraded to find some research on this, it was a little tough, hint, hint, I'm in the right crowd to drop those hints. But I feel that it works, and it's only my own personal opinion, so take that for what it's worth. But these wheels are, these U kind of arms are held on, or tensioned with a big spring, and those springs will break, throughout the year. And so I was, seeding and obviously fertilizing as well. And notice one row was gassing really bad. You can see the vapor from the tractor cab. Thankfully, it was going into the wind, so I didn't have to enjoy the smells. And think, oh, geez, I must have a broken line, because it was quite noticeable how much gassing was going on. Get to the end, gear up, and my safety stuff, go out there, realize it's a broken spring, go and put the new spring on, and I couldn't see that it was broken from just the way the frame was. Get going again, and the gassing was gone. And I started thinking, how much loss is there with some of these openers? And I know, in fall, dryness is kind of the enemy of some of this. In the Interlake in spring, even in 21, we had lots of moisture, so that anhydrous will attach, be attracted to that moisture in the soil pretty quick. But under challenging conditions, I do wonder how much loss there is without this. So I'm glad that we have this, more moving parts, and bigger check when you have to write the check for the upgrade. But I'm glad that we did it this way. So we put down, for dry fertilizer, we'll put down some nitrogen. Whatever P and K that we don't put in the seed row just due to toxicity, we spill it over into the mid-row band, and then all of our sulfur goes down. And then we top up, if you will, with our anhydrous with the nitrogen. So I get questions. I get lots of questions. Well, why would you do that? And what's the thought process behind that? There's a few thought processes. One is we can get our fields to 70 or 80 acres by doing kind of like a balancing, if you will. If you're just putting down straight fertilizer, we have a 430 bushel tank. You're probably 30 acres, 35 acres if you're wanting to put all the dry down. So with this, we can kind of time the fill to do both the anhydrous tank and the seed and fert. So that's just one of the big reasons. Another reason is I work with, in my area, Patterson. They're really good to work with. I asked them, what can you supply me for anhydrous? And I want to know, because if you're telling me you can supply me with so many tanks, there better be so many tanks there, and they've been really good to work with. So they give me what they can comfortably supply, and then we kind of balance that off. So, because there's always risk, right, in supply, right, and we've heard, in years gone past, supply can be an issue. But the other part of it is that with the dry fertilizer blend, I can buy that hedge costs, bring it home, ease the supply chain at my inputter, so that helps us out on that end. So that's kind of the thought process behind that. On the dollar side, it was 40 or 50 grand to put an anhydrous kit on with the winch and the cooler and the rate controllers and everything like that, which is a far cry from $450,000 for an anhydrous, for a mid-row bander add-on for a new drill. Never mind having to get a new tractor and all that type of stuff. So for us, it worked pretty good. I'll give you a success and I'll give you a failure in this 2024 on our farm. Success, so this is red spring wheat. It started off the year in 24 as stubble. It was wet, you're going to hear me, how many times am I going to say wet in one presentation? But it was wet, so we went in there right away, cultivated harrow-packed, because otherwise it's too mellow, the soil, and then just turned around and seeded it. With these wheat genetics, they'll yield, but you got to feed it. So I think the fertilizer was like 135, 50, 15, and 10 for a fertilizer blend. So we're putting down considerable product. Sprayed it with growth regulator, hit it with the more expensive fungicide, and actually, really good yields in the low 80s, somewhere around there. 15.2% protein, I think, and it sure showed on my soil test this fall. Soil test nitrogen levels were quite low in our area. Again, wet spring is part of it. Big crop is the other part of it on this field, anyways. But it worked out well for us on that end. Now, on the not so successful end, I believe that you can blame or learn, and it's kind of like what Ron was almost talking about the previous presentation about, you can blame or you can learn, but you can't do both. So we choose learn. So what we learned with this one is this is again same situation. Stubble at the start of 2024. We actually direct seeding. We started direct seeding soybeans in it. We've done direct seeding beans a little bit. Actually, really good success with it. We're going to try that again, but just stayed wet and wet. We actually started seeding the field, and the field was a little chopped up. So we did about 30 acres or so on this field, and again, it's right on the highway. Why are all the wet fields right on the highway, right? So it's on the highway, and I'm thinking, oh my, it's just going to be streaky, and I'm going to see my tracks everywhere. I'm going to be just seeing everything. So, and it was just so wet. So we actually stopped. It actually rained, and it rained a few more times, and now we're past the soybean seeding deadline. This is our last field to get in, so we're like, okay, let's just work it up a few times, and we end up broadcast seeding canola and then fertilizer with, we put urease inhibitor on the end, because that's what Marla tells me to do, and I always listen to her. And so it ended up, that was pretty disappointing. Actually, our soybeans were beautiful and yielded 25% more than the canola. And so we haven't had a whole lot of success with the broadcasting and taking these, contingency plans and stuff like that. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. But that's something that has burned itself into my mind about how we manage this, especially going from a go-forward perspective. Now getting into some of the ag economic climate, and this is very important because things have changed. And this is the prices from August 2020 to just a couple weeks ago. And we could see that these prices have really, taken a dump down. The volatility is something else. It's, pretty wild out there, especially on canola. So this has changed things. And this is our costing guides, or for our cost of production. We actually have 25 up in there. Costs have come down a little bit in 25, but they're still high, and they're still real high. And that's it. And crop prices have gone down faster than what our crop input or our cost of production have. So, we're struggling now with this cost price squeeze. We've seen this before in farming. I'm not so sure we've seen it so quick. Like, it was so good in 21 to 23, and I'd even say the first half of 24, where a few $100 an acre of profit to what we see with this next slide. And at the bottom, for those who aren't in finances, brackets are bad. We do 16 crops. We only have one crop showing profit after it's been fully costed, which is pinto beans, and it's not even that much of a profit. Fully costed is fixed cost plus labor. Fixed cost is land and equipment, and then labor, so it's just over $200 an acre of those three line items. Not all farms are going to have those fixed costs. So, older farmers, farmers that are high equity, probably going to have a little bit less on those costs if you look at it from a cash basis. But on the flip side, younger farmers or farms that have rapidly expanded in the last few years and used debt to expand, they're probably going to be seeing stuff like this, and this is going to be the challenge going forward. Just a note on the price of canola we look at new crop pricing. So when we build these guides, we do it from a farmer's perspective, right? I call input retailers and get some pricing. We look at forward contracting the grain. While I was working on this document, the price of new crop canola was ranged from $11.75 to $14. So, quite the range. Right now, I think it's about 1330, 1340, depending where you go. But, so I'm going to claim that as win. Red spring wheat is like 7.25 or 750, depending where you go. But this is the challenge that we have. I call this the sobriety test, the break-even prices. How close are we to market prices? So looking at our cost divided by what we project the yield to be, we come up with prices, and looking at, I'm just going to pick on canola because everybody's picking on canola right now, so I want to get in on that. $14 a bushel is looking to be break-even. Again, the current price is $13.25 to $13.50 for new crops. So. And that's after a significant rally that we've seen in the last week, and people are saying, oh, the wind might be out of the sails of this rally, and I'm thinking it's got a little ways to go for us to be making some money off some of these crops. So hopefully there'll be another gust of wind here to keep on blowing it up. Break-even yields, nothing like a 70 bushel hard red spring wheat break-even yield to snap you into reality. Nearly 50 bushels on canola. Our crop insurance long-term average is right around 70 bushels on our farm. So, we're lucky in our area. We can actually grow some wheat, just, the way it works. Canola's the challenge. I'll talk a little bit more about it, and its yield variability, at least on our farm. But, we got some big numbers to try to run against. Crop reseeding decision, I'm not going to talk too long about that, but I gave this at Crop Diagnostics School, and essentially it's a neat little tool. You can put in, what's going on your farm, what your probable yield is, what the price, those prices, $14 a bushel from the first half of July, just to give you an idea. You then, if you have an impaired crop, you can go do some plant counts, see, what the crop looks like, and then based on plant counts, it's saying 33 bushels an acre. And you could qualify for a reseed indemnity. In this one it is, it's $135. And it says if we reseed in the second week of June, obviously you're not going to get the yield because you're further into the calendar. So it's about 83-84% of probable yield based on the date. And we do the math, nothing's for free. We've got to still buy the seed, and we've got to pay for the reseeding. And this example gives it's $50 to the benefit if you were to reseed. And this is the point I want to make, and one of the key points here is that we all think that agronomics decisions doesn't change no matter what, but I'm here to say it actually does based on what the economic climate is. And if we were to put in today's values, so that's only just a few months away, and I'm estimating the reseed indemnity because those crop dollar values don't come out until 8 days, but we put in some different values, and we're coming up with $9 benefit. To me, that's a flip of the coin. That's talk to your agronomist and see what you should be doing. There's more risk, right? There's that cost is there. There's more risk, and if there's not as much to be gained, especially by that price, all of a sudden we have to really think about whether this is worthwhile. So again, the key point on this one is economics do influence agronomic decision making, and it's something that things have changed so fast. We have to be aware of that. The agri insurance, crop insurance, MASC, they have some charts on yield probability based on the date of seeding. I say, you know what, that's nice, but I like dollars and cents, so we look into net profit on days of seeding and which week you are, and you can see here that, well, there's not too many above the make the money line, unfortunately, but what this really speaks to me is that there is definitely, you want to get those 2-3 weeks in. To me, that's really key. And this is another slide that actually is now burnt into my mind for this year coming up, is that it's going to be so crucial to get in there and get seeding early, because once you start getting towards the end, like if you get into the 4th week of May or the 1st week of June, you're gonna just lose money. Like, what's the probability of getting some of that back? Is that gonna change our decision making? Is all of a sudden it goes from, and this has been the mentality the last few years, like go, because there's so much money to be made. But now, with these costs, we gotta consider that. So, I work for the government. I bring more questions than answers. That's what I get. That's why I think that I get paid to do sometimes. But this is the question that should be on every farmer's mind, is that once we start getting late into that seeding period, what should we be doing? So fertilizer costing, going to speak a little bit about that. These are the bar charts, our fertilizer survey. We look at the previous fall and then the spring. So for 2025, and it's not up there, we just have an estimated amount, but we look at a fall 24, so mid-October pricing, and then we'll do another survey mid-April and 25, and that'll go into our data. This is urea. It's come off its highs. but it's still pretty expensive. We look at the line chart. The top chart is wheat, the bottom one, the blue one, is canola, and the dotted line is the average. So this is like the fertilizer affordability. How many bushels of grain does it cost to buy 1 ton of urea? And if we're above that dotted line, it's expensive, and if we're below it, it's cheap. And it's come down off its highs, but it's still relatively expensive. But that's not the bad one. Let's look at phosphate. Phosphate is really expensive right now. It's just really expensive. And you look at that bar chart, and it's softened up a touch, but not very much. But considering how much these crop prices have come down, phosphate is super expensive. So that kind of gets burned into my mind too about, what we can do and decisions we have to make. So we have a fertilizer efficiency calculator. All questions should go to Marla about this. No, I'm just teasing Marla. She and John Hurd and Dr. Flayton, happened to help us out a lot with this. And we built this a couple years ago when, it was all good and you could, just show up and make $200 an acre. Now we built this for now though. This is really where it's important. So up top, you put in your fertilizer specs, what your sources are, the prices. You put in the middle, you put in what crop you're going to grow and the yield target. And then down here, you can put in your soil test, and it gives a recommendation based on a soil fertility guide. You can adjust that as agronomists as you see fit and come up with a recommendation. And then based on that, we go up here at the top, we have this efficiency. For those who maybe aren't so familiar with it, this is a very basic premise. The closer you apply fertilizer to when it needs it, when it's growing, the less environmental loss you'll have. Of course, a lot of this depends on, this is all the 4 R's, timing and placement. As a side note, I've given this presentation a couple times at a large farm, very large farm, came up to me and said, your numbers are wrong. And I said, okay, I'll let Marla know her numbers are wrong. But they said, actually, what we find is that they're way too conservative. They're finding a much wider spread between the broadcasting and banding, just as what they said. I said, well, the numbers aren't blue. You put in whatever you want, and I guess you could tell yourself what you want to see with some of this stuff too. But I'll have a little bit more on our farm about the lessons of banding, and then we can put in the middle and the bottom. We put in our application method and timing and what the blend is, and essentially what this calculator does. If you essentially apply when it's inefficient, it'll say you need to apply a bit more to keep things to account for that extra loss. And when we come up with the amount at the top there, we can see on our farm if we have some inefficiencies. It actually calculates in. And why I included this one, as I think is very important, is because, I'll be blunt, seeing a lot of floaters running around, and especially like in our area when it gets wet, it gets easy to do that. And I don't know, it takes some time to see the impacts to that. And I really think this year, how you manage your fertilizer is going to largely determine if you're profitable or not. And we can use this example farm. It's not a terribly inefficient way to apply fertilizer. There's some banding, some broadcasting. But you can see if we're to spring band it all, all of a sudden we're looking at a $15 an acre profit versus breaking even or even losing. So I think that's very important. And we got some environmental scoring down there too. So I'm going to bring this back into our farm here. So that fertilizer efficiency calculator essentially says you need to put more fertilizer down if you're inefficient in your 4 R's of how to do it. If you don't, there's a cost to that. I'm going to use our own farm as an example. So this is a wheat crop, and in 2022 is another one of those, ram her in, get seeding type of years. We, at about 2:30 in the morning, ran out of nitrogen in our mid-row band. We're putting down about 85 pounds because we had some residual from the 21 drought. We ran out. So at 2:30 in the morning, we're like, okay, what do we do? Do we shut down the drill and then wait till 7:30 in the morning or whatever, get the fertilizer, and rain's in the forecast again, Interlake? Do we do that, or do we just seed it? And so we can switch over to canola, so we can get going on canola early in the morning, and we'll just come back and broadcast spread some urea. So we said, okay, broadcast it is. We went back in after emergence, 85 pounds of N with the urease inhibitor. We got about an inch of rain shortly after that, and it seems like rain now, like I read in the history books, there used to be showers. Now it's downpours and vast amounts of rain in short amount of times. Like I think the only shower that we had last year, or this 21 year, 24 year was in November when we didn't, I mean, it's nice to recharge the soil, but that was kind of the nicest rainfall that we had all year. These showers are really, these thunderstorms are really starting to have an effect. I think what happened, it moved some of the nitrogen into lower areas, a lot more inconsistent. So this is 2022, there is 6.7 bushels difference. We got a scale on the grain cart, and at that time, $75 difference. And that $75 was, every single dollar was my dollar, because I paid the mortgage, paid the equipment, paid the retail bill, everything like that. That's all mine, so that's very impactful. So knowing this is very important. So coming back to our farm here, how much time do I got left? 5 minutes, perfect. 10 minutes, oh yeah, because I negotiated for more time. So lessons that we were reinforced to us this year. So I think everybody in our area got the same memo, but there wasn't actually a memo sent, because there was a lot of stubble left, but then this year burnt us, and everybody seemed to, after harvest this year, get in and do a deep tiller pass to try to just get a little bit of black soil on the ground. So some tillage is required on our farm. I'd love it to not be that way. We have one no-till field that's been no-till for, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years, and I really like what's going on with that soil. But if you can't get across the soil, then environmental sustainability doesn't happen if you're not economically sustainable on the farm. So this is what we have to do. So a little bit helps. Variety selection is very important. These new genetics on these wheats, they can yield, but you got to feed them, and you got to figure out how to get all those nutrients down. And then again, I go back to fertilizer efficiency. Sorry to beat a dead horse, but if you're putting down that much nutrients, the environmental loss, just kind of, or the potential for environmental loss grows with that. We're targeting, say 175 pounds of N soil plus fertilizer for wheat, and if, I gotta, protect all of that and broadcast and stuff like that, I'm not so sure how successful that is, and then variability is a lot higher. Canola, we have potash shatter. I have some not kind words to say about canola. Next slide. Oats, the new genetics can yield. It's pretty impressive. And soybeans, I still kind of get a chuckle about IDC and soybeans in our area. So, I call up Dennis, and Dennis, what do I need to do? He knows I got IDC. What do I need to do? And he says, well, pick a good variety. Okay, yeah, done. There's some nitrogen residual in there. What should I do? Well, double inoculate. And so we put, I listened to Dennis. We put, I think it's 1.7 IDC rating in the Seed Manitoba Guide, and double inoculated. This field had seen beans for quite a long time. And we had beautifully green beans all year long, didn't even flush yellow at all. Had people call me, say, what are you doing? Because this has happened actually a few times. I've done a soy green trial. People called me on that one too. That was in a previous year. I said, well, just, good variety. That's the biggest thing. And I said, well, what variety are you growing? They could tell me. It's like, well, what's the IDC? I'm not familiar with that. I don't know. It's still happening. I'm kind of surprised by that. And then on our farm, fertilizing, banding pays. We've gone back to broadcasting, and I understand people who run floaters aren't going to really, like to hear what I'm saying with this, but it is what it is. It pays, and it shows itself time and time again on our farm. Lessons learned. I like that, my top point there. Don't put yourself into a late season decision-making position. Yeah, that's like saying, the key to being wealthier is be richer. But I think what it is about planning, and that's why I talk about the tillage, right? It's about planning. I'm actually surprised, what our Jill has done with those improvements for, that seed bed. This video here that's looping, guess what? It was raining in the Interlake when we were seeding. Surprise! We were seeding. This is oats. 25 acres left. It starts raining, and then it starts raining harder and harder and harder. I'm like, I just got done oats after this field, and it's just like, I just want to get this done. So I kept on going. I'm thinking the same thing. Oh boy, this is going to look ugly. This one wasn't on the highway though, so I was a little bit braver, I guess. And then we seeded it, and this field's actually right across the road from our farmyard. Folded up quickly, got back into the yard. Quarter inch of rain in the rain gauge at that point in time, and I'm thinking, oh boy, you're going to see everywhere I go, and you couldn't see anything. You couldn't tell. Couldn't tell what the difference was. I was surprised by that. Again, some of those little improvements got a big payback. We've gotten into early seeding beans, soybeans. That's been, you know, really good in our area, and just like any farmer, we'll probably push it too far and get burnt, but hey, you know, that's the way it goes. But a lot of other farms in our area have been pushing the early seeded soybeans, and it has paid off for them. And again, one thing that we actually found is we went with an early season for an early field, and then we get combining earlier, and it's actually, you know, it's nice combining soybeans when it's dry, you're not fighting mud and stuff like that. The better quality wheat fungicide is worth it. I was shocked. So we're spraying I'm not going to drop brand names, but it's the more expensive, or it's the most expensive wheat fungicide, both leaf action and on the head. And so we had bought the pallet, and we had like 18 acres left. So the choice was buy another case and hold a half case over the shop of the year, or just, you know, have a check strip, right? Okay, well, we'll leave a check strip. Left a check strip, and it was a mile-long run, and I couldn't believe the difference even a few days afterwards. By the time we got in with the combine, and people probably won't believe me, and I still have a hard time believing me, but it's like 27 or 28 bushels an acre less in that check strip. I could not believe it. You could see it all year long. When I took my first swipe through it with the combine, I didn't believe my yield monitor, so I was like, okay, let's zero out the grain scale. I'm going to do one run. We got the scale in the carton. Yeah, that's what it was. It was shocking. It was broke down. It just ugly looking. It was very impactful. That cost me $4,500. I'm not going to leave check strips again. $4,500 could have come in handy this year. Crop lodging, high management crop lodging is an issue, so it needs to be actively managed. So I'm sold on growth regulators. And Kirk, our amazing cereals specialist, trying to bring me back. Like, Darren, calm down. Like, you know, these growth regulators aren't going to solve all your problems. You're not going to see them every year, or the results of it every year and stuff like that. But you know, it made harvesting a lot more enjoyable. You know, we couldn't see the difference. We could see a little bit of color difference. We left a check strip on one field, and but then of course we got wind and rain, like, you know, a few days before you're going to go and harvest. And it was definitely broke down. There's more heads on the ground in the check strip. That wheat picture that you've seen with that combine and the wheat that was sprayed with growth regulator, it just was very resilient to stand up. So and a better grades. So we're sold on that. And oats, yeah, we're going to roll our oat land, because, you know, just one day before you go out there, all of a sudden you show up the next day and it's flat. How'd that happen, right? So new questions that we have. What do we do with our canola acres in 2025? You know, why does canola lodge so much too? This picture actually is from last year. You know, a fantastic canola crop. Canola just seems to be like it's great or it's bad. And in our area, bad, like 35 bushels an acre is now bad with these costs. You know, what do you do? And that's kind of what the yield kind of was in our area for the better part. The earlier seeded canola seemed to do better. Had to spray it a couple times for flea beetles, but, you know, it did better. What do we do with this canola? It's really tough to know. I talked to one input retailer last week. He says canola's a new swear word in their office, so it is a challenge. And why does it lodge so bad? I can have short canola, flat. You know, canola is meant for irrigation under high fertility conditions with good standability, flat. Flat, flat, flat. It just goes so flat, and this has been, you know, a challenge with straight cutting canola in our area. Oat fertility. How high can we push this oat fertility? You know, I'll tell you, we put down 90 to 100 pounds, you know, fertilizer down, and it's, you know, assuming there's, you know, 25 to 35-ish in the soil. And I got some looks of like, oh, you're crazy. And then others are like, yeah, we've been, you know, upping it. So I'm really interested in that. Oats in our COPs is kind of, you know, a decent crop, and especially if you can get it to yield, it might be one of the few crops that make money. Why is it not more of a focus on managing IDC? Like I said, Dennis and Marley do a great job of extending, you know, that information. And I just, you know, even at the, you know, the agronomist and retailer network, there seems to be a little lack of knowledge about that. There was a mention about, you know, stage feeding crops. You know, wheat and canola is not corn. You know, corn is a beautiful crop that you can stage feed it. Wheat and canola needs it by a certain time, and it's a busy time, like, you know, spraying for weeds. I want to know if I can put down some different sources in the mid-row band to kind of stage feed that crop. I'm interested about that. We're kind of doing two sources right now with the anhydrous and urea, but I don't know if, like, we're not talking, you know, I'd be looking at like ESN or something like that. Kind of interested in that. Even in 2021, our driest year that we've ever had, at the time that we would have put on some fertilizer focusing on yield, we would have done it because the crops didn't dry out till the last week of June, beginning of July, so we'd always do that. And then, how much phos should we be putting down? There's a calculator out there, Marla, it's the Prairie. Well, I put her on the spot. Anyways, a nutrient removal calculator.
Yes, thank you.
That you put in your yield and it says how much is removing. And I put in our yields, it says 35 to 40, 45. We're putting down 45, 50 pounds on wheat and canola, and then we're putting down through the mid-row bands when we're doing our beans as well, just to kind of try to keep up those levels. And it just seems like we're not getting anywhere. Phos is so expensive. I love to go in with a fall band application, just to try to build up some levels, but the charts aren't saying this is the time for that. But I see floaters running right at the end of October, and people running a heavy harrow, and I know heavy harrow over chisel plow, and it doesn't incorporate that great. So I wonder how they're managing, because we're banning everything and finding that it's we're just running on a treadmill. So it'd be nice to start upping that. So FOSS, if you're listening, please come down. And with that, that's my presentation. So no time for questions. I don't want the soils people start asking me questions.
If anyone has questions, you can put your hand up and Dennis will come.
I'll ask one quick while Dennis is running. Would you make a profit on spring wheat if you only crop the high yielding zones in your fields?
So we have looked at variable rate. We have a few fields that I think would benefit from it, but surprisingly a lot of our fields are very consistent. The topography is very consistent, and when I do the yield maps, they're all within actually a few bushels an acre. And actually, fun fact, you can make a yield map all green if you just change the legend and slide it across to show people. But I was actually surprised how tight some of the yield ranges were in some of our fields this past year. We're looking at that. We've tried in the past, but to get it to pay has been tough. If you can tell me if it's going to be wet or dry, I can tell you where I'm going to put my fertilizer, and that's the challenge. Someone would say interlake wet. Then 21 happens. So.
Any questions from the audience?
Darren, just wondering who or when or how does Manitoba Agriculture update the estimated operating cost and fixed costs on their chart on the website?
Yeah, for sure. So I work with that. I work with a team. My manager, Roy Arnott's in the crowd. If you don't like it, talk to him. So what we do is it's published now, and it's going to be going on the website shortly, and there's actually some printed copies out in the foyer there. But near the end of October and then through November, we price it just like how a farmer would. So we have our fertilizer pricing survey. I talk to some input retailers and say, okay, what's a common chemical tank mix for wheat, for example, and they'll tell me, and I'll price it that way. I don't price the low, I don't price the high, I price it somewhere in between, and then just build it from there. And we have passes for field operations for fuel, and we just build it that way. But of course, those are government numbers. That's meant for like an average farm, if you will. Producers' numbers are always going to be much better than ours, but at least it gives a starting point and a debate point to go and do. But we try to price it just like how a farmer would.
Hey Darren, great presentation. With regards to the yield impact with delayed seeding, what is the data source for the different crops?
That would be crop or agri insurance data. Is that what you mean? Like, where does that data come from?
Yeah,
it's
where
there.
it's coming. And is it, so is that's the average of all the farms in Manitoba, the general trend?
At a certain time,
Right.
right? So, again, you got to be careful what you can read into some of this. You can, read too much into it. What that tells me is that crops are better at the beginning than at the end. I don't think that's a revelation to anyone, really. But to me, it's about which ones fall off quicker. That's, I think, the more important. Canola is a little bit more resilient. We would actually, on our farm, push canola seeding to the end unless the field was ready. And I don't know. I don't know. The early canola in our area was better than the kind of the mid to late canola, but that was our area. Every year is different. We seeded canola late in 23, had our best canola yields ever. And that data, it's in, I think, 5-year batches, so they updated it occasionally.
Related or relative to that, I guess I look at that MASC data and talk about it with farmers, and I make the comment that this is kind of the rolling average, any individual year, and then, but that's where good agronomy can comment about the circumstances of the year, where you can take advantage of a new set of circumstances.
Yeah, and I'm a big believer in using numbers to make decisions, like using data, using science to make those decisions. It's sometimes hard because we have our personal biases, and that's how Dad did it and stuff like that. But it's about leveraging, the skill in this room and the experience in this room to leverage those decisions supported by data into even better decisions.
Can I ask a quick one?
Yeah.
You talk about zero-till and you're at...
People
you
online
need
can't
a
hear that.
microphone.
There we go.
What's holding back zero-till in Manitoba?
I can speak in our area, the rain clouds. And soil. So like the soil that we have switched out of zero-till, we did a couple years zero-till and we've had to switch out of it, have been heavy clays. I'd say actually pretty similar to Red River Valley type of soils. We have a lot of actually soil variation. Talked to Marla about, variable rate and how, we have very flat kind of even fields, but we do have variations. We have some lighter soils, we have some transition soils, we have heavy soils. And it's the amount of trash that we're getting on these fields seems to seal in the moisture. And we direct seeded a soybean field this year that was zero-tilled, and I couldn't believe that trash, how it just, sealed in that moisture. And just that deep till pass, and again, we do deep till pass or chisel plow with spikes. Part of it's compaction, part of it's just getting a little bit of soil, like black soil, and it breaks down that residue and everything flows easier in the next spring, has been what we do. But I'd love to go to zero-till if I could, but again, I listen to Marla and she says, well, if you can at least reduce your tillage, that's one step towards being a little bit better. And again, farms are so big everywhere, but even in our area, they'd rather do it. But the difference, especially on a year like this, and these land costs of having a year of not producing something, it just takes such a big bite. So the economics rolled into that.
Okay, thanks, Darren. That was a great talk.